Good morning. Um, the last few days, Rob and Eva and I, we were at the CBOQ assembly. I mean, gotta explain, right? CBOQ, it stands for Canadian Baptists of Ontario and Quebec. And our church is part of this greater denomination called Canadian Baptists of Ontario, Quebec. Right? And all our pastors are credited through CBOQ, so we can be pastors. And actually, we found out that now this denomination has 294 churches in Ontario and Quebec. And it's kind of like a summer camp, right? We went to Brock, and we were living in a dorm. Okay, it's much like the summer camp that we're gonna have. They have speakers, worship time, and of course, there's a business meeting, which our summer camp won't have. But it's interesting, right? It's an association of churches that call ourselves Canadian Baptists. And so we have worship together, we get to know each other, we have meals with each other, and then we also get together in the annual general meeting, much like if you're a member of our church, you've gone to our AGM in the end of March, right? So talk about business regarding the denomination. So I think it's a very wonderful experience to know there are other churches out there who we associate with, and they are very different from us because they talk about, in addition to English and, Cantonese and Mandarin that we're used to, there are a lot of churches that speak French, there are churches that speak Russian, and a Ukrainian church is about to be planted, and there are churches that speak Tagalog, which is Philippine, and then many languages, and they come from very far. So for us, the assembly used to be here in Mississauga, so it's like we just drive over there. So we kind of complain because, it's so far away, we got to decide whether to stay over or we're going to drive back and forth. And then they kind of say, which church is from the furthest away? And this church is from Mississauga, which is a First Nations place in northern Quebec. It's like, how long did you drive? He's like, 16 hours. Wow, 16 hours, that's how long it takes to fly back to Hong Kong. They drove all the way to come to this assembly, and that's just wonderful. And I think it's a newer experience for our church as well, because we haven't sent delegates for quite a long time. I remember being there like in 2004, 2005, which is, some of you weren't born then, right? So that's how long it has been. So it was good that we have delegates. Of course, Eva had been there all the time because she has served on the CBOQ board for a number of years, but we probably don't know that, right? But so we have a lot of connections there, and we are able to see how God works in all kinds of churches of different sizes, languages, and also disposition. And they do a lot of different kind of ministries. Some churches are doing a lot of refugee ministry. They say in the last, 8 years or whatever, they have sponsored 25 refugee families. And there are other churches that kind of converted their parsonage. If you don't know what that is, like in the old days, that's where the pastor lived, next to the church. Our church is rather modern, so we don't allow pastors to live here. Okay, no. But those, they did. But of course, these days, pastors don't live near the church like that anymore. So they converted that, and it become a place for newcomers, because that church is in Fort Erie, right around the border. So a lot of newcomers, whether refugees or immigrants, come in. And over the years, they have served many of these people who might be just transient. They don't stay in their church. Right? They come and they needed a place to stay. They needed people to help them to do all the immigration papers and then find a place to settle, and they move on. But this church has helped many of these new immigrants or refugees to do that. So much so, they hire a pastor, full-time person to work with them. So there's a lot of amazing and different varieties of ministries, and know that God is at work outside of Logos Baptist Church, Mississauga, as well as inside. Right, so it was very encouraging to really see how God is working differently in different places. Also, hopefully, open our minds up to say, hey, we can do a whole bunch of different things if God so lead us. Now we're back to Philippians. Today we talk about the topic is joyful co-workers. Paul here is talking about co-workers. Now we come to church, And we become friends in church, and if you serve in the church, you're co-workers, right? So is that a good thing or bad thing? When I was in Germany, we serve a lot of international students, mostly from mainland China. So these two young men who, when I first go there and we met them, we were a very small Bible study group of maybe 10 people. And these two guys were there, and they're two of maybe 5 Christians in our group. So they were saying, we were like brothers. Like, oh, how so? I was like, yeah, we came from the same school. So apparently their post-secondary school in China has a partnership with the university in Germany, which we are located at. So they send groups of students here. They say, oh, yeah, we came together and we came here. We were both from poor families, so we got to become roommates, and we worked and go and find kind of part-time jobs and work and make, pay for our tuition and all that stuff. So we were like brothers, and they were literally like, they hang around all the time. And guys hang around, right? I mean, girls too, in bigger groups usually. Guys hang around. And okay, great, you guys are Christians, so we got to build up our small church. And slowly, after time, when more people came, we formed our own group of co-workers, we call them, which is kind of like the core group here. Okay, so I'm saying, oh, you guys are the older Christians, let's come and join and serve together. They're all willing to serve, but there's only one problem. They aren't willing to serve together. When they're serving together, they're like competing. I'm remembering the disciples of Jesus always coming to Jesus, say, Jesus, can we be your left and right hand man? And the rest of them will rule over them. Right? Jesus said, no, over here. We are serving each other. If you want to be the first, you're going to be the last. Right? So they're a little bit like that. They're like just always competing. I want to serve. I want to be in this leadership position. But if I'm in that position, he can be in that position. Right? And it becomes very distracting. And frankly, discouraging for me a little bit to say, man, it's great that both of you want to serve. You want to do a lot. But must we lift up someone and push somebody else down? Must we always argue and kind of just like having a dividing line and talk about me and you rather than us? Well, I mean, if you still remember, that's the situation the Philippian church is in. Paul is the one who have founded this church. But he is an itinerary preacher, right? He founded this church and he's left and he's gone to do other things. And the church leaders grown up and they are running this church. But apparently 2 of these leaders, they are having infighting, okay? In chapter 4, we get to find them and they say, oh yes, there are these 2 women who are infighting together. Not only the 2 of them, but because they're leaders, they have followers. So it's a bigger problem, and they write a letter and asking Paul for certain directions. So through the first 2 chapters, Paul's starting to talk about it in a kind of roundabout way, right? He had never, up to this point, named the people who are combatants. He didn't give them any direct, authoritative commands to do this and not to do that, right? It's through his prayers, it's through his own example, it's through the example of the Lord Jesus that he's trying to bring them to see what Christian living together means. I remember first chapter, a lot of prayers. Secondly, about himself, whether he lived or died. And then in chapter 2, then we talk about he's bringing in Jesus Christ's example, who even though he is God, he's willing to humble himself and become a man and die on the cross for us, right? So now he gets into the next point and he starts talking about these 2 guys, Timothy and Epaphroditus. Yes, I mean, really have to try to see how to pronounce that one really fast, right? Epaphroditus. Yeah. It's like, why did he talk about that? Well, of course, in Paul's letters, he usually talks about his co-workers and he names them. Okay, and sometimes they are there to do something for him. For example, in this case, he is in jail. Paul is in jail. He couldn't go visit, so he's sending Timothy to visit on his behalf. And then Epaphroditus is actually someone that the church at Philippi has sent to visit Paul. Now he's sending him back, right? So there is a purpose to why he's saying this. But at the same time, in the way that he had described these two, his co-workers, we can discern a little bit on, what is it that Paul is trying to encourage the brothers and sisters in Philippi through these two brothers. First of all, when we look at the verse 19 and 20, he starts to talk about Timothy. So he says, I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. I have no one else like him. In another translation, it says, I have no one else of kindred spirit like him. I know we don't use words like kindred anymore. It's like spirit, like-mindedness. We don't have people who are like-minded like him. How is he like-minded? Well, he showed genuine concern for your welfare. That you is the church at Philippi, right? So Paul and Timothy, they're not from that church, but they both are like-minded in that they are concerned about the welfare of the church at Philippi. And then he goes on to say in verse 21 and 22, for everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proven himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. So he goes on to say, not only is Timothy, like Paul, shows genuine concern for the welfare of the church at Philippi, but he is selfless, right? He is not like everyone else who's only looking after their own interests, but Timothy is also willing to look at the interests of Jesus Christ, or use another word, the work of the gospel. That's synonyms, right? He is willing to serve with Paul in the work of the gospel because that's what Jesus is concerned about. Right? So these are the two things. Now, so in this way we can see, well, what does that tell us? First, let's talk a little bit about Timothy. Well, Timothy is a younger guy, right? He is Paul's apprentice, if you will. Right? And in the book of Acts, they talk about how Paul have met Timothy, and he became a follower of Jesus, but he also goes with Paul on his missionary journeys. We know that later on, Timothy was sent to be in charge of the church at Ephesus, to be their pastor. But Timothy is not like Paul. Paul is this big missionary who goes everywhere and starts churches. And he's very capable, and he's eloquent. He can go and debate the Greeks because he's well educated, right? And he's not afraid, right? He goes and pronounces the gospel. He died a few times, and people beat him to death, or he have to escape through, sitting in a bucket and being lowered from the city walls to run away, and all these things. And he's going to come back again. Guy wouldn't go away. He's very brave and courageous and guy, right? So, but Timothy is the opposite almost, because the way that he's being described is he's kind of timid and easily intimidated, because even as he was a pastor in Ephesus, and Paul has to write letters to him in 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, basically telling him, you got to really be strong and courageous, right? You got to stand up and say what you need to say. You have to defend against all the false teachings, and then you have to preach the true gospel. Don't be afraid of those who are heretics and those around you, right? Paul repeatedly have to say that to Timothy. At the same time, Timothy is kind of physically frail. He's younger than Paul, but he's kind of sick all the time. So in 1 Timothy, Paul has to say, don't just drink water, use a little wine, because your stomach and your frequent illnesses, sick all the time. And Timothy is timid and easily intimidated, and he's a physically not an imposing person. And yet, Timothy's strong suit is he's loyal and faithful. Like, you can imagine, if you are Timothy, you might feel kind of discouraged all the time. There are other people who seem to be stronger, more charismatic. Your teacher, Paul, you're not like him at all. So wherever you go, other people are like, you're not like Paul. Right? So you could be discouraged. But he continues on. He treks on. Wherever Paul is, he is. And he will do everything needs to be done. If he's going to be a pastor, he's going to do it. Okay? So he has that kind of faithfulness. And Paul is saying here to say that is because he has two things. One, he is my kindred spirit. He has the same concerns as me. One, he cares about the welfare of other people. And secondly, he cares about the interests of Jesus Christ. So I think these are important things for us to learn. You may sit here and you say, well, some of these are like great missionaries. What does that have to do with me? Because I'm not like Paul. Well, maybe you're not. Maybe you are. But if you're not like Paul, maybe you're like Timothy. Because, you might not be as physically frail as he is, or you might not be easily intimidated as he is. And if you are, well, then you are Timothy then. Okay? But he has this singular determination, and his work with Paul is because of their mutual concern for others and for the work of Jesus Christ. And that's very important, because there will be times where people will fall away. It's nice when everything is going well. Everybody wants to serve together. We all want to celebrate and be happy. But when things are turning sour, people leaving, and nothing is going well, most people just leave, or they're like, I'll just on the sidelines and let's watch what's going to happen. Right? Very few people are still wanted to do things when others are not. So one time we went to a conference in Lebanon, which was hosted for Christian organizations who care about what's happening in Syria, to learn more about the church and the situation in Syria. Now, this is before now the civil war is over, right? That was still with the civil war. And it's dangerous to go inside Syria. It's dangerous for aid or any kind of humanitarian aid or anyone to pass inside, outside. So we can only meet outside, but the organization that's sponsoring this event had invited probably a dozen pastors of different churches from Syria to come out to Lebanon so that they can share firsthand what is happening in different places in Syria and their needs. So we were in this conference, it's kind of a 3-day conference, and a lot of people were there. And I was there on behalf of our organization, Canadian Baptist Ministries. And then about the second last day, in the afternoon, there was a meeting. And as we were starting to leave the meeting, the meeting's over, we're all kind of just walking out. Suddenly, out in front, around the stage area, there is a loud voice that says, "No, you can't do that!" And we're all like, what? Okay. Something is happening, we don't know what. But there's no solution, because after the outbursts, everybody's dismissed, right? So then at dinner time, rumors began to spread. And people started to tell, what happened? I don't know what happened. That as that meeting was over, the sponsoring organization said to the leader of this group of Syrian pastors that, it's difficult times economically and strategically. Our organization is going to take a different route. So we will no longer support any of the ministry in Syria after this conference. And we're like, they just said that? But they organized this conference, right? The purpose of this conference is for us to understand Syria, to see what more support we can give them. They say, oh yeah, well, things happen in organizations, and that's what happened. And we're like, yeah, but they are the organization with the most money, most connections, and most things that's already done. If they're pulling out, like, what's going to happen, right? And no wonder that senior Syrian pastor was so outraged and kind of, outburst, right? It's like, why do we come out then if you're going to tell us? You should have just told us this without having 2 days of us sharing everything and bring our hopes up that everybody's going to help us. Now you're going to say, no, actually, we're leaving, right? So we're all a little confused and feeling down, right? Like, what are we going to do? And then at dinner time, somebody's tapping me on the shoulder, and one of the partners that we partner with in Lebanon. And they're like, John, if you want, we're inviting a few of the organizations who want to do things, still want to do things in Syria will be in the other private dinner area, and we can discuss what we can do. So we went there, and all the Syrian pastors were there. And there were about, 8 or 10 of us who are in different organizations from across the world. And we spent a very fruitful evening just first to comfort and console the Syrians, right? Because they just felt like they got betrayed, right? And we're like, no, that's okay. There are still some of us here. We want to help, right? Tell us how we can help. And however little we have, we don't have the money and the size that organization has. No, we don't. But we're still here. And so from that born, CBM helped one of the churches in one of the cities in Syria to do some rebuilding of homes, because at the war, all the homes got destroyed, right? So some of the Syrians want to go back, but there are no home to go to. And this church is trying to redevelop the community around the church so people can go back and have a home. So that was one of the things that happened. But the main point is, there will be times, right, when it's counter the prevalent trend to do something, right? Even though you feel that's the right thing to do, but other people might not join, or they might all be leaving. But what are we going to do, right? So Paul here is saying, Timothy, we're kindred spirits. We have same concerns. Whatever you think about his physical capability or whether he can debate and win against the Greeks, he couldn't do that, but he's always here. He's always here, right? And his concern is for you, the church in Philippi. That's why he's here. That's why he's here. And secondly, his concern is for the work of Jesus Christ. Right? He's not just a good person, like I care for you, so I'm always here for you. But yes, that too. But secondly, and more importantly, his concern is for the work of the gospel. Right? He's here because he is a servant of Christ, and he wants to do that out of the love and share the love of Christ. And sometimes it's hard because we might see a need, but we don't want to do anything about it, because we feel we don't have what it takes, okay? But to know that this is something that Jesus Christ cares about means if you look around, there's nobody else, it's going to be you. You have to take the responsibility and do it. In Germany, I'm going to say, so we built up our small Bible study group. It grew bigger and more people came, and then a lot of brothers and sisters, they're university students, right? And they become Christians, and we teach them how to serve, and they serve. So this one sister, who by that time, she probably believer for about 5 years, and she has, throughout her university days, served, and in the last year, she served in our Coworkers group, core group. But if you serve, it's kind of a lot of hard work, all right? A lot of meetings, and you got to do a lot of things, and as most people from our little church are not Christians, then those who are Christians, you really have to do double duty, right? You can't expect those who are seekers to be able to do anything. So this sister is like, man, after 1 year, I'm quitting. I can't handle this anymore. It's like, no, okay. Nothing can change her mind. Well, that's okay, and when younger people start to learn to serve, you go through different stages. So then she graduated from her master's degree, and she went to a city in the south of Germany for her PhD. Right, really smart kid. And the schools in Germany starts in October. So we got a call from her about in November, and she's like, Pastor, we have a small Bible study group here, and there are no pastors, and then there's nobody who knows anything about how to run this group. And apparently, she says, I'm the one with the most experience, like at least I was in the core group for 1 year. And it's like, okay, what should I do? So we're surprised to get the call, but very pleasantly surprised, because she quit, right? I didn't expect her to do anything. And she's going to a city where there is an established Bible study group. There are people who want to come, but nobody knows how to run this place. And she, who has 1 year of experience, probably not great experience, otherwise she wouldn't have quit, right? But she's asking me, like, what should we do, right? And so, of course, I give them some tips, and then sometimes she come up to visit us, and we give her more encouragement. And then we saw in front of our eyes this young woman who has a little bit of serving experience, not a lot, but she literally ran this Bible study group for the times that she was there for the PhD and grew that Bible study group by herself. And the reason was very simple. It's like, why are you doing this? Like, PhD study, that takes a lot of time, right? I mean, it is nothing, right? And during that time, she got married and everything. Oh, your life, have many things happening in your life. If you think running a maybe 40 people fellowship with an existing pastor and other co-workers, that's hard work. I mean, just try doing by yourself, right? So why would you do that? It's like, yeah, but if I don't do, well, who else will do it? Who else would do it? I can see these people who are yearning for God's word and they want to learn, right? But there's nobody else. I'm the only one here. Yeah, sometimes it could be like that. But for her to care about what Jesus cares about and to stand up and take the ownership of it, it's not easy, right? But she's willing, much like Timothy. It isn't easy for Timothy to do anything, let alone become a standalone pastor in Ephesus. But he was going to do it, sure, with some encouragement from Paul. But he was going to do it because he cares about what Jesus cares about. So for us, how can we become co-workers in Christ? Okay? A, you got to care about what Jesus cares about. Look around. What's the need? You know that Jesus cares about it. Don't let somebody else do it. Because God allow you to see it, maybe that's your job. Take ownership. Take responsibility. Secondly, don't just care about yourself, right? We have a lot of needs, but you have to care for the needs of others. You can see the need of other people, and you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of yourself to be a co-worker. That's the kind of co-worker that Timothy is. Now we turn from Timothy to Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus, as we say, he was sent from Philippi to go and visit Paul and to bring him some stipend money, because for Paul, whatever he needs to buy, he has to use his own money when he's in prison. Secondly, Epaphroditus is the one who tells him, oh, everything is going badly back at church. Okay, so what you see here is after he got there, Epaphroditus actually got really sick. He almost died. Okay, but he recovered. Now Paul is sending him back. And the way he described Epaphroditus is this, starting from verse 25. He says, but I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger whom you send to take care of my needs. He's calling him my brother. Sure, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. Co-worker and fellow soldier. Co-worker means we work together, right? That's what the word means. Fellow soldier, well, that's a little different. Okay, fellow soldier means we are fighting together. Okay, so first we're going to think about co-worker. Remember we talked about the first example, these two brothers from Germany, they're kind of competing all the time. Just like Jesus' disciples, they are competing all the time. The reason they do that is because they have the wrong concept of what the church and what the faith community is about. Right? Because if you're in the world, it's a world where you have to become upwardly mobile, so you move up and move higher. Right? You get a job, you get a good job, you want to get a raise, you want to be promoted, and once you're promoted, you want to be promoted again. If you work for 40 years, there are many promotions waiting for you, right? Right? Now, nobody want to get stagnant. I got promoted 10 times before I'm 30, but after I'm 30, I flatline. Well, for us in this world, that's a terrible way to live, right? I mean, like, man, you didn't do very much. Okay, so we're always thinking about how we be upwardly mobile, right? But then, as we already said, Paul has pointed out, but as a Christian, we got to live like Christ, which Christ's model is downwardly mobile, right? Because he cared about human beings and he saw that we're in sin. He comes to save us and sacrifice himself. He's giving up his rightful place with God to come down to become a human being. First, that's that. Well, secondly, as the church, as a faith community, we are co-workers working with each other. Right? Elsewhere, Paul's image that he uses is the body. We are different parts of the body. One is a hand, one is a foot, one is an eye, one is an ear. Well, I sure hope that your hand and feet don't compete with each other. Right? That might be problematic. Your foot wanted to do what your hand is doing. Right? And your ear wants to do what your eye is doing. I don't think anybody would survive that. We'll take you to the ER to say something's wrong with you if that's happening in your body, correct? Right? But they actually work together. All right? And so as I'm making gestures, like if they just make gesture for no reason at all, well, I'd be crazy. Okay? It has to be somehow there's a central command on brain to say, well, do this because of that. Okay? Rather than be able to get my water bottle and drink and put it to my mouth. If I bring up the water bottle and put it to my ear, Dr. Manson's going to take me to the hospital. Okay? Right? So actually the concept in the church and faith community, we complement each other and we work together, not against each other, not competition. Right? So we can co-work, but the way we co-work is very important. So I think it's very important to recognize that we each have a function and we are willing to work with each other. And the toughest people to work together, believe it or not, are usually pastors. Right? Because, pastors are, people perceive pastors, you're at the top of the totem pole and you're like, you're supposed to be the leader and everything. When you put a whole bunch of leaders together, what happens? Well, they all try to lead each other and then ended up they'll kind of spat and, whatever. Competition that's how it is, right? But having this really wonderful experience in Germany with a group of pastors, because in Germany we have a group of missionaries and pastors who serve the Chinese in Germany. There's not a lot of us, probably about 15 to 17 couples, right? And we get together. We all serve different places, but we have a spring camp together. It's always Easter that we have this big camp for 5 days and 4 nights. And joining everybody, all the Chinese churches in Germany get together for this one big weekend. And the pastors are the planning committee. Some of you on the summer camp planning committee, sometimes you can have disagreements, right? And then you got to, who's the chairman, who's the vice chair, who's the GM, who's inspiration. And sometimes, people who are in authority could fight for these positions. Like, why are you the chairperson? Why I'm not the chairperson? I've been here longer than you. I know the people. And you can kind of fight over things. But I'm very thankful for this group of pastors. We didn't do that, right? We're all there to say, no, we work together, right? And we can take turns. So the rule is always, if you're the newbie, you're here, the first time you come and join the planning committee, you're going to be the chairperson this year, okay? And you're like, well, I don't know how to do it. But actually, I'll tell you a secret. The chairperson is actually the easiest position. Because you get to delegate to everybody, right? Everybody else have something to do. The chairperson just chair the meetings, right? And when it's the actual summer camp, there's a speaker, right? So the chairperson don't have to speak. You just sit there and then come up and introduce the speaker. You sit back down. It's done. And because you sit in the front row, you don't know what's happening. Everything is running afoul back there, but that's the GM's job, right? That's the sound person's job. That's whoever's job. And you sit there and nothing. If everything goes wrong, you go back to the meeting and say, hey, which one of you dropped the ball, right? So actually it's the easiest. But of course, that's the high profile one, right? Because people see the chairpersons always getting up there. So I always say the new person gets to be the chairperson that year. The older ones, you have experience. I'll be the GM, or I'll take care of the food. I'll do the registration. I'll do all these other things. And every year we rotate. I thought it's such a wonderful way to co-work together because we're not competing, right? We're trying to lift each other up, and we're all trying to see who has gift sets in certain areas so we can do this together. And well, no, there's no point in fighting for things because we don't serve in the same church. It doesn't matter. What matters is why we come together is want to bring the best experience for everybody else who comes so that they can listen to the word of Christ and be transformed through it, right? I'm so very thankful that I have that experience among pastors who can work together. And if pastors can work together, brothers and sisters, how much more easier for you that you can work together in one spirit, using your gifts, and help each other, lift up others, right? And we don't need to compete with each other. We can work together. And that's the wonderful thing about it. Not only do we work together, but remember, we are in it together as soldiers. You know what soldiers do? They risk lives for each other. In the year 2002, that's the Afghan War. For some of you not born yet, that's the Afghan War. Okay, so these Allied soldiers, American soldiers, they're in Afghanistan, but there's not a lot of ground troops, and the ground troops need to be covered by air support. So then, and there is this pilot, his name is Johnny, and he flies this A-10 Warhawk. It's a very small, slower single pilot attack plane, and its purpose is to cover the ground troops. Okay, so then one time, he and his wingman were flying to cover the ground troops. But there was a lot of fog in the mountain area. The ground troops were in certain valleys. And as he goes down, and he can hear in his ear that the ground troops are relaying information to say, right now, troops in contact, troops in contact. That means there are enemies around somewhere. And he's going on, and they're like, we need air support. Like, okay, we're going air support. Except for one thing, because the fog, right? So he couldn't see where the ground troops are. And I mean, that's 2002, you know, it doesn't have really high-tech GPSs like today. So you have to literally go down to be able to see what's happening on the ground. So you have to come down to really low levels. And then you see over there's gunshots, right? You can see flashes. And then he'll lay down his shots on the enemy troops. But it's very dangerous because it's in the valley, so he has to kind of turn. Like, I don't know, you watched Top Gun before? It's real life like that, right? So you, one wrong turn and you crash and you die. And then secondly, he's very low, right? So if he can see the enemy can see him too, right? They have ground missiles that can hit slow planes like his. So you have to go down literally and fly and count. As he go down there, he's counting like 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000. Why? Because when he gets to 10, he has to go up. And he can only spray his shots during those 10 1,000s. Then he's got to go up. So after a few runs, he ran out of bullets, no more. He's going up and get his wingman to say, hey, you got to come down. His wingman is a little bit timid, maybe like Timothy. It's like, I can't see anything. How do I know I can even make it? So Johnny is like, that's okay, I'll help you. So you follow me, right? So he's flying about 10 meters ahead of his wingman. He said, you just follow me, I'll go down, you be on my tail. And once we clear the fog, then you start shooting. So this guy, no more ammo, he's literally flying down and risking his life with no ammo so that his wingman can cover the ground troops. And they did that. So in that one special operation, 22 soldiers who were pinned down in the valley by the enemy fire, at the end, they all come back alive, including Johnny and his wingman. And then afterwards, you know, people were asking, why would you do that? Like, you're a soldier, but that's a little crazy, right? Risking your life to do that. And then Johnny Bravo, he says, well, I do that because every one of them, pointing at those other soldiers, they would have done that for me. They would have done that for me. Soldiers risk their lives every day for each other. And that's why they're willing to, because they know other soldiers would do that for them as well. We're not soldiers, or are we? In some ways, in the Bible, it does say, use some military words, right? Talk about we are fellow soldiers. What does that mean? Doesn't mean we're going to physical war, but to say, in a sense, we got to bond together. We have to fight for each other. Because in Jesus Christ, that's who we have. And they will do the same for you as you're doing for them. That's why Epaphroditus, Paul says, he's willing to come. He almost died, but he was willing to do that. And that is a fellow soldier and co-worker, the kind of people we need for each other. Now, brothers and sisters, co-workers are our companions on the way. We can co-work together, and we can have joy. Of course, sometimes we might have conflict. We have disagreements. But cherish the time that we can have together. You know, I lived quite a long time on this earth. And when we're talking about the 35 years of our church, I've been here 34 of those 35 years. That's a long time. So all the things that you experience, all the friends you make, all the coworkers we have, I still sometimes lament the fact that, you know, after my teenage years with a fellowship, not here, in my previous church, our teenage friends, we are living in different places. We have the same WhatsApp group, but it's hard to see each other that much. In my university group, we have another WhatsApp group, but hard to see each other very much. Right? And here in this church, you know, I used to be an English pastor. And some of you who were there during my tenure, you can tell me how many of those brothers and sisters are still here. It doesn't mean they're not Christians anymore, just like because life happens and you move to different places and you know you have families and things happen, then look around you. Your brothers and sisters will not always be near you, right? And a lot of times when we're younger, we act as if this will last forever. And sometimes we have our disagreements, and at some point you feel, we'll be okay later, right? But you never know. People move away. People leave. People die. For whatever reason. You might leave. I didn't know that I was going to Germany. I did. And I have to leave. That was sad. But that happens. But here, while we are here, while we still have that opportunity, can we be joyful co-workers together? Can we together concern about what Jesus is concerned about? Can we look for the needs of others, not just thinking about ourselves, but helping them? Can we co-work and putting our gifts together so that the body of Christ will grow? And can we be there for each other, knowing that they will be there for you as well? Let's pray.